we've certainly got a lot to talk about once again. It's not good when this is the way that Formula One keeps making headlines or making me make long videos or being a big, strong topic of discussion. Everybody has a very strong opinion on the incidents of the Japanese Grand Prix, for sure. If you want to see mine as they happened, do go check out my Twitter account, because I was very vocal over there. I can't remember if it was the Circuit the World one or the Alice Holloway one, but one of them. You know what? Go check it out and then follow them both. And then you'll always know when I do rants on Twitter, which are infrequent, but usually happen on race weekends. The whole weekend just became like a mess very quickly. I personally don't think the FIA handled it very well, but we'll get to all that as we go through. The only way to do this is to kind of work through Sunday, because like I said, so much happened. And then there's all the rubbish to talk about post-event as well. We had some announcements for drivers as well. There's a lot to talk about. So let's stop rambling and let's crack to it and get onto this one. So the first thing that happened, obviously, because there was a lot of rain. I believe qualifying was dry, but definitely the race wasn't, and it had been raining for a little while prior to the race start. So the track was very, very wet. There was still a lot of rainfall coming and a lot of heavy rainfall predicted to come, as we saw. Should they have started the race on intermediates? No, there was a lot of water on track. I believe the regulation is, however, that if they start on full wets, they have to start under safety, which would have been safer. Alas, it is a difficult one because there will always be the people who are like, it's dry enough. Why are we on full wets? Why are we behind safety? If we were going full power, we'd be clearing the water by now. We wouldn't have this problem. So it is always a coin flip, and the final decision should always be made by the race director with safety in mind. Safety should always be the first and foremost thing we're thinking about. We shouldn't be thinking about the show if we're putting 20 guys' lives at risk by sending them out there to put on said show. Okay, if it's dangerous, it is dangerous, and we don't go there. It's always been a discussion point, or at least a question mark, about the Japanese Grand Prix as to why we host it in the middle of monsoon season. Because inevitably there's always some form of rain that affects the weekend at some point. Obviously, the answer to that question is money, timings that people have got in contracts of when they actually want the race to run. Maybe the Japanese Grand Prix organisers pay more money to have it towards the end of the season. Who knows? There's a load of reasons we'll never actually know or never definitively get the answer to. They are behind the scenes stuff that are usually fueled and funded by money. That's the whole way the sport works, sadly. Think back to the Australian Grand Prix in 2020 when it had to be cancelled, and the promoters didn't want to be the one to cancel it because they didn't want to have to give the refunds, and the FIA didn't want to be the ones to cancel it because they didn't want to have to give the refunds. And everyone's standing there going, we know you can cancel it, just cancel the thing. But no one wants to because no one wants the financial burden of cancelling a race. The Japanese promoters were probably very keen to get that race going. The FIA are also probably pretty keen to get that race going because if they don't, they have to return the race fees to the teams if they straight cancel a race. So there's a lot of financial factors that sometimes disappointingly overweigh the safety factor when it comes to racing, particularly in heavy downpour like that. But should they start at inters? No. They should have started on the full wet, even if they'd have done 3 laps behind the safety and all of the drivers were going, this is ridiculous, the visibility is absolutely horrific. We should all be extremely cautious in Suzuka anyway, especially in the wet. We know the visibility is poor, and we know that there are areas of that track which is very, very difficult to safely recover a car whilst cars are racing. I'm not going into it. We all know what I'm talking about. I've been talking about enough over the weekend. I don't need to go into it, but we should be being overly cautious at this track, especially in torrential downpour. That's the regulation, that by starting on full wets, we have to do a safety car start. We should have done a safety car start. We'd have avoided the signs incident, potentially, at the start. Everyone would have been going slower, so more than likely we would have prevented that incident with signs at the start. It is wet, ridiculously so. Also, if you're on full wet tyres versus inters, you do have more grip, so it's more likely we would have avoided that incident. And then they could have called the red flag and all 20 cars could have made it into the pits without having to send anything out on track before they were all safely returned. Now we move on to the massive talking point, and the one that really shouldn't be a talking point, nor at Suzuka should we have ever repeated the mistakes of our past. I will never fathom why the tractor was on the track. Not at this track, not at any track, but especially at this track in torrential downpour with poor visibility when we know what we should have learned, what we thought we'd all learned back in 2014. Now, there's no justifying that tractor being there. Okay, fine. Yes, he was going too fast under the yellows. Yes, he was going too fast on the reds. Yes, he deserved a penalty for doing that. Or a penalization or whatever he's under. I think he's got a grid drop for the American Grand Prix. But he got a penalty for it, right? Fine. Penalize that. But under no circumstances was it Gasly's fault that that tractor was on track. And that tractor was on track way before Gasly was anywhere near it, because the entire grid go past it under safety car. The biggest head scratcher. Apparently, none of the teams knew the thing had been released onto the track. And they were only finding out about it when the drivers were going, you know there's a tractor on track, right? I kind of didn't see the thing. That is mind-blowing. We may never know why that was the thing, why it wasn't even informed that there was a recovery truck on track at Suzuka in the pouring rain. I have to be honest, I was very disappointed with the FIA for many reasons, but mainly so was the way they handled that situation. They should have come straight out and gone, not good, really not good, not okay. We are going to do a heavy investigation into why that happened, how the tractor got on the track whilst there were cars on track. Okay, at the time it was released, there was no red flag. There is this difficult situation of the whole idea of having full course yellows and double yellows and all these other things is to keep the race going whilst another car is being recovered. Maybe that's the point here. Maybe it should be that if a recovery truck has to go onto the track to recover a car in a dangerous position where there isn't really anywhere else for the cars to go, and there are pinch points at Suzuka, annoyingly Sainz found one, and we discovered that it was a pinch point at Suzuka, maybe that is the point where the race has to be neutralized because it is not safe to put a recovery tractor on track to clear that car out of the way. Maybe that's the learning lesson here. What boggles my mind is we had a very similar thing in Monza, which saw the end of the race finish under safety car because they couldn't get the tractor there quick enough because of safety. They couldn't just send a tractor out there to be dangerous whilst cars were driving around. Now, there's a big difference between the Monza and the Suzuka thing, and the biggest difference is visibility. It was dry. It is less likely for a car to lose control behind the safety car in the dry, and if it does, that's poor form on a driver rather than the conditions. But with poor visibility and no grip, there was no justification, and there never will be justification for the fact that tractor was on track. For the FIA's first comments about it to be, well, Gasly was speeding, didn't you know? Absolutely atrocious, not forgivable, and not okay. There's just no way that was the way they should have handled that situation. It should have been first announcement, we see this has happened, we agree this is not okay, we're going to start a full investigation into how this happened, and we will find out and we will make sure this never happens again. Second statement, oh, by the way, Gasly was speeding, we're going to also be investigating him. But the way the first announcement comes out is pretty much saying, well, if Gasly wasn't going so fast, this would have been fine. And that he could have been going 3 miles per hour. That would still not have been okay for that tractor to be on track. We then had the delayed restart, right? Now this, the points were confusing because during that period of waiting to know whether or not we were going to restart, they kept replaying the graphic of if 25 to 50% of the race is complete, this is points. If 50 to 75, this is points. 75% plus, this is points. A very helpful graphic, or so we all thought. Now that graphic was being put on the screen by FOM, by the race director people, by the people who do the TV coverage, which leads me to believe that those people also didn't understand this weird little loophole that had been put into the regulations after Belgium last year that none of us, including commentators, including the teams, nobody knew was in there, or nobody knew could be applied in this way. The race itself was actually fantastic. I really like Suzuka. I think it's a great track. When it's damp, it is more exciting, it is more difficult, but even in the dry, Suzuka's a great circuit. I think the racing was really good. We had some really great drives. I mean, Verstappen's brave braking in the wet on Charles Leclerc going into turn 1 was phenomenal, and he did deserve to win the race just through that move alone. It was absolutely incredible. Real showing of racecraft in the wet, which Verstappen has showed in years gone by. Thinking back, I think it was 2016 Brazil. He had a really good masterclass in the wet. So he is very, very good in wet conditions in the car. So he very much deserved to win the race. And to be fair, he's deserved to win this championship because Ferrari and Leclerc have thrown this away races ago. Silverstone, I'd say, was the moment where they went, you know what, we don't really know what we're doing anymore, so let's just hand it to them now. Red Bull and Verstappen have been dominant, have been unflappable, have had issues to deal with themselves and still overcome those issues to be the stronger of the two cars. At the beginning of the season, the Red Bull and the Ferrari were neck and neck. I'd still say pace per pace, they are. But the difference is the people inside and around those cars. Red Bull are not backing the wrong horse and they're not pitting Perez rather than Verstappen and giving Perez a win and forcing Verstappen out on dead tyres and dropping him down to 6th. Verstappen and Red Bull haven't won the Constructors yet, but it's inevitable, as was the win of the Drivers' Championship by Verstappen. They have deserved these 2 titles. They fully deserve to win these 2 titles because Ferrari have not had a touch on them for quite a while now. But the way the points got handed out, obviously now we know that the 25 to 50, 50 to 75 and 75 plus percentages only now apply to a race that has started and has then had to be aborted. Basically, the Belgian Grand Prix last year. So because less than 25% of that race had been complete, they'd have only handed out like 6 for first, 4, 2, 1, 0, or whatever, I can't remember what it was, but they'd have only handed out that first column in Belgium last year with this new system in place. The way they were making it seem was that that was depending on how much of the race you had actually completed if it turned into a timed race versus a laps race, right? Because we only got about 40 minutes of racing done in the end. But apparently no one but the FIA was aware that so long as the race restarts could have gone for 1 lap. But because it had restarted, that would have been full points. I stand by, that's a stupid system and should not be the way that that is applied. I believe it should be done if a race is delayed because of weather or cut short or ended early. It should be done on that 25 to 50, 50 to 75, 75. Irrelevant of whether we done 1 lap, 5 laps, 20 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes, an hour and a half, whatever. That's how that system should work. Because otherwise, you haven't learned anything from Belgium last year either. Because otherwise, you'd have exactly the same thing. Whereas you can send them out to go racing for 4 laps to meet the minimum quota needed so you don't have to refund all of the poor spectators that have sat there for 3 hours in the rain that don't get to watch a race, and you won't refund their tickets because they saw the minimum 4 laps needed, and you'd still get 25 points. I don't understand it. I don't get how that ever became a system. It's sillier than the sprint races, in my opinion, and that's saying something. Just a mind-boggling system. But alas, it meant that Verstappen takes his 2nd World Championship. That's done, as we all knew it was going to be. So we can just throw that one away now and focus on whether Perez is going to beat Leclerc, which is quite likely, and Red Bull will take the Constructors at the Austin Grand Prix, and then that'll be done too, and we can all start looking ahead to 2023, I guess. The Japanese Grand Prix didn't leave the FIA in shining glory, for sure. They handled that situation incredibly wrong. And it is a shame, because I think even if the mistake's on them, and I'd have almost respected them more for openly admitting we misjudged that, we got that wrong, we shouldn't have sent it out and we did. We didn't know if it was going to be red flagged. You know, there's some reason it got sent out. We'll never know it because they'll never tell us. The racing we did get was spectacular. It was a great 40 minutes of racing. The only retirements we had were Sainz and Albon off that first lap. That but instigated the red flag in the first place. The other 18 cars made it through those 40 minutes without incident, which was brilliant. We'll do a quick rundown of the top 10. So obviously Verstappen won ahead of Perez, who showed that Red Bull have got it right again, and Ferrari are just sitting ducks for them in arguably a track where Ferrari did have the advantage. I believe, but I could be wrong on that one. Leclerc then finished off the podium. It was another good day for Alpine, who got double points, with Ocon 4th and Alonso 7th. Yes, I'm just reading the results. I've been talking for 20 minutes. We can, Hamilton 5th, ahead of Russell 8th, another double points for Mercedes. Also with both cars finishing against Ferrari, that does bring them closer in the constructors fight. Sebastian Vettel was 6th in his final Japanese Grand Prix. Honestly, I wish that this had been his final Grand Prix. He was so... obviously clearly loves this track a lot. Was so emotional about it, even after qualifying, and they finished qualifying early. He made it through the Q3, but they finished it early because they only did 1 lap, where everyone else did 2. And even then, he was super emotional and super like, this is amazing. I'm really gonna miss this place. So really, really great for him to finish in decent points in his final Japanese Grand Prix. Rounding off the top 10 was Nicholas Latifi in the Williams and Lando Norris in the McLaren. Yeah, so that's everything really that's the main hitters that happened at the Japanese Grand Prix. Like I said, not the shining glory for the FIA, and I only hope they reflect on that and realize if somehow something like this happens again, which I really hope it doesn't, they handle it better, because the way they handled this was very wrong, as I said. And also to make this points thing clearer, because this seems like a backwards way of doing it. You'd have thought the Belgian Grand Prix last year would have made them like, okay, if we're not doing full race distance, or at least 75% race distance, we need this tier point system in, because otherwise people are getting 25 points for doing 1 lap. And that's ridiculous. But it seems they've gone the complete opposite way and taken what we all understood was this tier system and been like, nah, that only applies if we don't restart the race. Other things I didn't understand. What was the little world champion lounge? That was strange and odd, and I don't really know what Verstappen was supposed to be doing in it, so I'm not surprised he didn't either, and sat there for about 2 seconds and went, yeah, this is weird, I'm gonna bounce now, guys. Let's have a quick look at constructors. So Mercedes now 67 points behind Ferrari now in the constructors. Alpine and McLaren have swapped again after the double points finish for Alpine. Alpine now ahead by 13 points in constructors. So I think that one's going to swing until the end of the season for the next 4 races. I hope it does. That would be interesting. That'll be at least something to watch come Abu Dhabi when everything else is tied up. We had a driver announcement, as I thought was going to happen. Gasly was announced to be going to Alpine. Surprisingly though, his replacement at AlphaTauri is Nick de Vries. We will see how good his performance at Monza was, if it was a one-hit wonder or a sign of what's to come. We shall see what he does next year in the AlphaTauri. We still have a Williams seat and a Haas seat. They're the only 2 seats available now. Haas seat is debatable between Mick Schumacher, Antonio Giovinazzi and Nico Hülkenberg, I believe. The Williams seat, I have no idea who's supposedly going in that. I thought it was de Vries' seat, but he's gone and got himself an AlphaTauri one. Then we have the cost cap stuff. My. The FIA just looking worse and worse, and this will also be telling as to how late I've filmed this, because recent news has been basically Aston Martin and Red Bull have been found guilty of breach of the cost cap last year. Not this year, but last season. So Aston Martin went over it by a mil or something, and Red Bull went over it by a substantial amount. At the moment, it seems they've just been given a don't do that again. I don't actually know what their current penalty is for having busted that cost cap. Red Bull are saying that it was all on catering. Which no one believes. The Aston Martin one, I think, is kind of fallen to the wayside, because although they have broken the cost cap, it is much, much less, or by much, much less than Red Bull have. The FIA have come out and been like, yo, Red Bull, you wanna talk about this in private? Very similar to the Ferrari engine situation we had maybe last year, if not the year before, when the FIA were like, Ferrari, do you not want us to publicize all of this information, and basically you're just going to fix what you've done wrong and we won't tell anyone? Ferrari went, yes, please, we'll take that option, because then we don't have to give up our championship points or anything thus far. We do have to give up our nice engine, and suddenly our car is not going to perform very well, but at least we don't have to tell anyone that we probably actually really did break the rules. So it seems they're going a similar route with Red Bull. Helmut Marko seems to be only concerned about how people found out about this information and not the fact that they blew the budget by a significant amount. So we'll keep you posted on what is actually going to come of this, but it's just another blow after another blow after another blow to the FIA and how they seem to be running things. Yeah, not a good weekend or week leading out of for the FIA, and I'm not even sure Drive to Survive can save this one, because a lot of people are, I mean, it's an interesting one because this isn't new, right? The FIA doing this is not new in the slightest. Cause of fixing things and fiddling things to make sure one team do one certain thing. I don't subscribe to that conspiracy. I think Red Bull were the better team this year. Ferrari could have taken the fight to the end, and that's kind of the reason I'm like, well, I don't think this is a Red Bull blowing that. I mean, I'm sure them blowing the cost cap has helped in their development, but I wouldn't say that that's why they've been in championship content. Well, maybe it is. So maybe I don't want to say that. I don't know. It's such a confusing situation, and now there's money involved and agreements and deals involved. It means we're never actually going to hear the full story. We're never actually going to get all the facts. So everyone is just going to come to their own conclusions, their own conspiracies, their own thoughts, feelings, and whatever's about it. And people probably keep having the same arguments again and again. And that's a great, lovely fan atmosphere to have in the sport, and certainly doesn't divide, and certainly makes everyone want to come together and be nice to everybody on social media and online, rather than blame everybody else for things that have happened because their driver or their team didn't get the benefit and another team or another driver seemingly have. And it's just such a lovely, fun, happy, lovely little place to be in, isn't it? God, that got quite deep quite fast. I have mentioned in a few videos recently though, the format of this Track Talk series may change slightly next year, probably will change slightly next year. As you can tell, I'm not super good at staying on top of them, so we'll see what that looks like for next year. But yeah, that's kind of it, I think. I've been talking for nearly half an hour, so that's gonna be it. And if I've forgotten anything, we shall carry on the conversation down in the coffee pot below. But we are back to Austin for the next race. I quite like the circuit of the Americas circuit. I think it's a cool track. It used to be the one where we always got the vortices, those twiddly whirlwindy thingies that come off the rear wing. I always thought they were really cool, and a cool kind of way to see the aerodynamics of the car, though I assume this year, as the aero has been the big change, maybe we'll get some different kind of vortices. Vortexes. Those cool whirlwind things. But that's all I have for this one. Do let me know your thoughts, feelings about everything Japanese Grand Prix down in the coffee pot below. Everything from the interim between this and the US Grand Prix. Please keep it civil. It's an absolute mess out there at the moment in terms of Formula One. I don't want to be hiding comments. I don't want to be blocking people. I like to keep it nice and civil and chat. If you have conspiracy theories and you want to share them, go ahead, but don't shout at people who don't agree with you, and don't shout at the conspiracy feeders if you don't agree with them, right? Let's keep it nice, let's keep it civil. Let's be the marker in the sand that Formula One should be, and let's actually be nice to each other online and have a nice, decent place where you can express an opinion and it can differ from someone else's, and that's okay. But for now, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. It's been an absolute blast, as always. If you enjoyed this video, go show that like button some good old-fashioned love. And if you want to support the channel, go hit subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss next time I upload a video. Stay awesome, and I will see you all in the next video! My God, can we just have a race that's just a race and no drama and everything's nice and we can just talk about the racing rather than the mess?